It's what?
There's usually an audience.
Yeah.
I've heard some of them say.
Let me see. I turned down some places. I was thumbing through. Oh, the Jim Ketchum story. Have you heard that about the portrait?
Go ahead.
Okay.
When we moved into the White House, someone advised Lady Bird, have the president have his portrait made early. This is because there are so many portraits of presidents, particularly Woodrow Wilson, which were made after he had served his term, and he looked much more haggard and drained, and it would have been better if presidents were painted the first week they go in. But Lady Bird prevailed and prevailed upon the president, and finally, about the 4th year he was there, she talked him into posing while Madame Shumentoff, who was the Russian-born woman who had been painting Franklin Roosevelt at the time of his death, had persuaded Madame Shumentoff to come to the White House and do the portrait of the president. This was a wonderful choice because Madame Shumentoff could talk and paint at the same time, and she regaled the president with stories of her exit from Russia and entering the United States, and kept him still for as long as he would sit still. He wasn't sure at all that he was going to like having his portrait painted, and this was done in a room in the upstairs of the White House. He left that day, and the next day she put the finishing touches on and got ready to gather up her painting equipment and easels. And now this is not the way to tell it, because do you know this story? Madame Shumentoff was the perfect choice to paint President Johnson because she could keep her stories going, talk and paint at the same time. And so he was pleased with the portrait. She came back a day or so later to pick up her easel and paints, and there, to her surprise, and I must say horror, she found a whole array of valets, wooden valets, with different outfits of the president there, his ranch clothes, his business suit, some tuxedos, and his suggestion that she make 5 duplicates of her portrait and in these different outfits. And she called quickly to Jim Ketchum, who was the curator, and said, Mr. Ketchum, come up here immediately. Something awful has happened. And he went up and found her amazement and his own at this demand for 5 more portraits painted to copy the other. And Madame Shumentoff said, the president, he thinks I am a Xerox machine. Well, of course, she didn't paint them, the ones that he had requested. But it just shows how he'll be reluctant and then whip up his enthusiasm as time goes on and things turn out well. You know that
he did the same thing to G. Harvey.
Uh-huh. He did? Wanted this.
Finally, G. Harvey ended up doing nothing for him. He said, paint that steer,
Cow
paint
of
that
it.
steer, paint that steer, paint that steer. And Harvey just said, the hell with it.
Listen, when I wrote I didn't write it, but when I put together Mrs. Johnson Sr., his mother's scrapbook about him, and they talked a publisher into paying us over $100,000 for that book, just a copy of it. Bob Gutwillig, who was head of this publishing house, came to the White House to present the president the first copy. And we went in there, and LBJ just praised him, and then he just went through the whole book, line by line, correcting it here and there. his own mother's scrapbook. And Bob Gutwillig just turned white. He thought that the president was going to make him rerun the whole thing, which amazing.
He was a good editor.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
When he had the time to do something. Well, what do you think?
I think that's all I've got in me.
Well, you did very well.
How did I compare with